Hi everyone, today we're going to make a print. We're going to do our carving on little pieces of styrofoam and you can make such beautiful designs. Let's jump right into it. So I decided to do a design that says love. You can make this say anything. One of the important things with printmaking though is everything you do has to be done backwards. So when I wrote my L-O-V-E, I had to write all the letters backwards and make sure instead of it going L-O, it had to go O-L to say L-O at the end. Let's go through how you plan this. So one of the first things I do is I take a very little scrap of paper and I plan out what I want. So in the end it has to be this size. So I got this little scrap of paper and what I'm gonna do is what I want to do. So I'm gonna write L-O-V-E, which I already actually have done. I'm gonna make it a little darker, L-O-V-E. And this is exactly how I want it to look when I'm finished. So what I'm gonna do is if I look at it with the light above it, so there's a light bulb up there, I can see exactly what my design needs to look like when it's done. So I need it to look like O. I need to change because it's the same forwards and backwards. L, the L has to be backwards right here. And then E looks like this backwards. And then a V will be here. And again, I can check that this looks like how I want it to. If I look at it in the light, now that it's backwards, it should look how it will look forwards. It's a pretty cool trick. So now I can play with the design. I can make these into bubble letters. I could add any details like designs. And by the way, I'm doing love. You could do splat. You could skip words and do a little picture of a kitty. Maybe I'll add a kitty here. Kitties are the same backwards and forwards, so you don't have to worry about having backwards design. But it's good to know how a backwards design works. So if you start doing something, you're like, wait, is that the same forwards and backwards? Gotta think about it. Awesome, so I have the basics of my design. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put my scrap paper on top of my styrofoam and I'm gonna press really hard, making sure it doesn't wiggle with a slightly dull pencil. I don't like to use too sharp a pencil because then it tends to rip the styrofoam and rip the paper. So something to keep in mind also is once you're on the styrofoam, you can't erase because it works through making a mark, through making a dent in the foam where the paint, the ink that is, isn't going to hit. So if you make a mistake and you try to erase it, all it's going to do is make more marks. So it's important to sketch and make a plan, and it's important to be slow and deliberate when you're copying your plan. Only do what you really want on your finished products. Great. So now I have the basics carved into this. I know it's hard to see, but hang in there. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace them over with my pencil to make them a little bit deeper now that I won't be going with this paper on top. Because with this paper on top, you don't get it quite as deep, but you get exactly like in your sketch. So you know how it's going to come out. So now I'll give it a little trace. Wonder what you're doing. I have love and I have a cat on mine. All right, so I just finished carving around all of my initial designs. So now I can even go in, and if I want the whole thing to be pushed down, I can go one way and then the other to really push it down so you don't see it as much. So anything that sticks up, we'll see. So if I go through and I push down as much as I can, then that will be where I see the paper. All right, so I'm gonna go through this, we'll be back. All right, so I've traced over those, so they're a little bit thicker. I'm also gonna trace around the edge of the cat's face to make that a little bit thicker so it'll show up a little bit nicer. You don't want any really thin, tiny marks. Thin, tiny marks are gonna be harder to notice in the final thing. So I'm even gonna make the eyes a little bigger, the nose just a little bigger. Just make everything just slightly bigger than you think you have to. And for slightly deeper than you think you have to. And then I can add some little details, like maybe some swirls, maybe some designs, and making sure all my favorite ones, I'm thinking about making a little thicker and a little deeper than I think is necessary so that they really show up well. All right, so let's call it here. So cute. And let's jump into how to do the rolling part. So I'm going to take a little glob of ink, and here I just have a little plastic tin. You could use like a baking sheet or a little piece of plastic, whatever you have on hand that won't absorb the ink. I'm going to start rolling one way and the other. Now I'm looking for a couple things. I'm looking for it to look kind of velvety with no big globs. And I'm also listening for like a tacky sound. I don't want it to sound gloopy, I want it to sound tacky. Beautiful. And when I have it just how I want it, I'm gonna roll it over my piece of paper. So I'm gonna go back and forth. And you see how that's a little gray there? I want it a little bit darker, so I'm gonna get a little bit more on. Make sure I go all the way up to the top. You see every part of my design that I carved, nice and deep, is not getting ink on it because I'm using this roller. Perfect. Kind of want a little bit more ink. So I'm going to squeeze out just a little dot because I feel like a little bit more and it's going to print out a little bit prettier because I'm seeing a lot of little white dots still. So I roll out that new bit of ink and I'll roll it on. Oh yeah, that looks a little bit more solid. It's not going to look perfectly solid on the final result though. It still looks kind of like vintage t-shirty with the marks. Like this one. Awesome. So now I have this on a scrap because I'm going to cut this out. I'm going to flip this upside down. I'm going to put it close to the edge so we'll have a little less to cut out. And I'm going to push it down, push it down, push it down, push it down, push it down. And then I can flip it over and I can rub it with the back of my fist. Or with anything, it's important that it's not something that's going to poke in. So I don't want to like take a pencil tip and rub like that. I don't want to take my fingers and rub like that. I want to use things like the back of a spoon would work well, where it's just going to rub the ink onto the paper. It's not going to change the design or push anything too much. And then I can test it by lifting up the corner and peeking. Looks good. Look at that, so cute. So now at this point, you could wait till the next day. That would probably be better to make sure it fully dries. Sometimes you don't really have that time, that's okay. Just be very careful not to smudge it or get it on everything, on your clothes. And then I can even glue this to a paper. Ooh. Did you know glue would help with gluing this to a paper? Normally I put the glue on the back of the paper, but since it's so wet, I'll just do like this. cut my fingers. And then I can add some designs around to make this a frame. I could add swirls, I could add flowers, I could add designs. There are so many options. And it might relate to what you drew. So maybe you didn't write love, maybe you wrote like bam, like an action scene, and maybe then you'll pick like comic booky colors, and maybe you'll go with a whole theme and draw superheroes. Or maybe you just did a cute picture of a crown and you'll draw little princessy things around it. There's so many options. Whatever you decide to do, I hope you have fun, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.